Okay, we'll start with this, a story that's a bit of a bombshell that I don't think many people have had the time to process, as Eddie Hearn has revealed that he had a conversation with David Benavidez's promoter, Samson Lewkowicz, last night and discussed potentially making the Canelo Alvarez fight on DAZN, but Lewkowicz said they'd want USA TV rights for Amazon Prime Video.
He wasn't playing.
When Eddie Hearn said that he would be willing to do the fight, all they have to do is pick up the phone.
He wasn't playing.
And almost immediately you notice the stark contrast, the difference when Eddie Hearn is left to negotiate a situation and when Al Haymon is left to negotiate a situation. That Eddie Hearn wasn't playing and he wasn't wasting time. He got right on it on what could be the Benavidez fight, as opposed to Al Haymon, who, when he structured that deal for Canelo Alvarez in the summer of last year, he didn't actually include David.
As more details are coming out,
what did they agree to last year, and what's going on that saw Canelo Alvarez leave the PBC just one fight into that three-fight deal? David Benavidez wasn't part of that three-fight deal. That when Al Haymon structured it,
it doesn't matter what version of the story you go with. Mike Copinger's version of the story, Dan Rafael's version of the story.
David wasn't part of the deal, and Al Haymon is the one who structured it. Eddie Reynoso himself said that no offer was ever made from anyone, from Al Haymon or any other promoter, to do a David Benavidez fight. And these reports seem to corroborate that, irrespective of what Samson Lewkowicz claims to have offered Canelo.
All of a sudden, like he's got $55 million to offer Canelo.
And Samson Lewkowicz is not the one with the Amazon deal. Al Haymon is the one with the Amazon deal. The same Al Haymon who didn't think to make David Benavidez a part of Canelo's contract.
The same Al Haymon that wants the U.S. rights to the fight.
Because if Samson Lewkowicz is asking for them, he's asking for them on Al Haymon's behalf. He's the one with the Amazon deal, though. Why would the rights to the fight, the U.S. pay-per-view rights, go to Al Haymon? Your fighter's the B-side.
You need me to tell you that?
Canelo has all the brass, all the hardware. He's the undisputed Ring Magazine and lineal champion, and he's the A-side in these negotiations. That goes without saying, though in this era of boxing, it needs to be said, because a lot of people, they like to be obtuse whenever Al Haymon is involved. Why would the rights to a Canelo fight?
He's gonna let the B-side dictate terms to him, where the fight goes, who airs it. Is he gonna tell him what the splits are too?
Now I understand why Team Benavidez didn't push harder with the WBC, because if they would have and the fight would have got ordered, they would have only got a certain amount of money, 25%?
They likely want more than that.
What is Al Haymon's real legacy in the sport of boxing? Convincing a bunch of B, C, and D side fighters to act like they're the A side and, in effect, fucking themselves out of a lot of money, like he did with Wilder when he advised him to reject the DAZN deal, Kovnowski rejecting the Anthony Joshua fight, and Luis Ortiz.
Advising Rolly to walk away from the Garcia fight so he could fight Isaac Cruz for less money.
And now this, you're telling Canelo Alvarez that the rights to his fight have to go to a platform that he doesn't even fight on, while Matchroom is representing him.
How does that work?
So that you have something to offer up your broadcast partners at Amazon after you screwed the pooch with Canelo, trying to amend the deal, holding his guarantee for ransom.
Now you want to hold the fight to ransom.
That's what I told you. You don't agree on certain names and certain dollar amounts just to try to restructure the deal afterwards. Canelo is not going to go for that. He doesn't have to. This ain't one of your scrub fighters that you can put your thumb on.
And you think holding this fight to ransom gives you any leverage, any real say-so in these negotiations?
It only exposes what I've been telling you for all these years, that Al Haymon's real legacy in the sport is convincing B and C and D side fighters to act like they're the A side and, in effect, costing themselves big fights, big opportunities, big money.
Whole goddamn thing reminds me of the felt negotiations between Anthony Joshua and Deontay Wilder.
It's practically the same thing. There's a clear line in the sand between who the B side is and who the A side is. The guy with more brass, more belts, and more marquee value. And yet Wilder was willing to hold the fight to ransom unless he got half the pot.
In the end, it didn't work for him, did it?
He ends up getting beat by Tyson Fury for less money than he stood to make with Anthony Joshua, and he admitted that himself. That situation reminds me of this one. It's just a little different.
Because it's the broadcast rights he's after. He needs them. He needs something to give Amazon.
Is David Benavidez going to stand idly by and let Samson Lewkowicz and Al Haymon fuck this up for him. Does he want this fight, or does he not want this fight? For how many years did you see Errol Spence Jr. tell Terrence Crawford that he was on the wrong side of the street?
Seems to me that David's on the wrong side of the street.
That's what it all boils down to. In the end, you're just a mandatory. You are just a mandatory challenger, and all you're really entitled to is 25% of the pot. That's it. And that's if you involve the WBC. You chose not to, likely knowing that.
And I wouldn't even call that leverage in the situation because the WBC haven't put a time frame, a deadline as to when Canelo has to fight him.
There's no time frame. And even when there was one, we saw how Canelo Alvarez responded when the WBC tried to pressure him to fight a guy on their time. He reminded them they're on his. He chucked their belt, and they've been kissing his ass ever since.
So believe me when I tell you, Team Benavidez ain't got no leverage in this situation. You're in no position to demand
that the rights to the fight go to your broadcaster, go to your platform.
Who the fuck do you think you are?
You're not Pacquiao to Mayweather. You're not McGregor to Mayweather. Hell, you're not even Wilder to Joshua.
Stop it.
These are shyster tactics. That's what they are. Shyster tactics from two used car salesmen, Simpson Lewkowicz and Al Heyman.
You tried to turn the fans against Canelo Alvarez, but by now, people are hip to your game, your strategies.
You think you can dictate to Canelo Alvarez who gets the rights to his fight?
Simultaneously convince us that he's ducking David? It looks more like David is ducking him.
I think he knows we don't mess around. We don't deviate from plans.
The difference between having the PBC promote your show and having Matchroom promote your show. Matchroom!
We don't tell porkies. We don't wait to pay people.
Do you remember a couple of months ago when Deontay Wilder was complaining of late payments? After the Robert Helenius fight. Who do you think he was complaining about?
He was boxing under the PBC banner. He wasn't boxing anywhere else.
And what do you hear him complaining about? Late payments that take months to receive.
Safe to say he must have been talking about the PBC. Who else was paying him?
And where did Canelo Alvarez just come from?
The PBC.
Thus, when Eddie Hearn says what he says, you know who he has in mind.
Wait to pay people. We have funds. We have funds. We have funds. And we are ready.
The difference between how a successful promotional company is run and how a mom-and-pop shop is run, the mom-and-pop shop that is the PBC, that has had a lot of people fooled for a long time now, all based on the success that Heyman had years ago with Floyd Mayweather. He hasn't been able to produce another one.
If I'm to believe that he's the one responsible for Mayweather's success,
then make another one, because you could use them based on the state of your company. Or is it that you merely stumbled upon a generational talent that made your job very easy because you don't actually know how to do your job?
You're fucking up.
Bouncing from network to network, burning people all the while, burning fighters, costing them money. You just lost your biggest acquisition.
You're fucking up.
Canelo Alvarez didn't terminate his deal with you prematurely so that the rights to his fight would go to you and your platform so that you could benefit from them.
I think he knows we don't mess around.
You don't understand what's going on yet, do you? You don't get it.
What?
The people at the PBC don't want to send David Benavidez over. They don't want to send him over unless they get the rights to a show that Matchroom is bankrolling.
Which is a non-starter.
Think about it. Canelo Alvarez is so clearly the A side in these negotiations.
Right.
He's represented by Matchroom. Matchroom is backed by DAZN. So if Matchroom represents Canelo,
And Canelo's the A side.
why would the broadcast rights for the show go to the B side? Why would they go to David's side of things and David's team? Why would they end up with Al Heyman? That doesn't make any sense. If Matchroom is representing Canelo in these negotiations, that essentially means that they will be the financiers of his guarantee.
And David's.
Because whatever David stands to make from this fight is only made possible by Canelo, by Canelo's marquee value, by his ability to draw. Thus, if Matchroom represents Canelo, they're the financiers. So why would they concede the rights to the show to Al Heyman Just to get David to cross over?
Al Heyman's not the financier. He doesn't represent Canelo.
David should want to cross over just for the opportunity to box Canelo Alvarez on a show this size. David Benavidez himself.
David Benavidez, the fighter, doesn't need to worry about who's airing it, who's broadcasting it. You're the B-side!
Samson shouldn't be worried about that either. But Samson represents David, and he's acting on the behalf of Al Heyman. That's what it is.
If you don't cross over there, and you don't do this fight, what's the alternative? What, you gonna stay at 175?
Pursue the winner of Better Beef versus Bivol. Let me remind you of something. If Dimitri Bivol wins that fight, he's a Matchroom guy. If Artur wins that fight, he's a top-ranked guy.
You don't claim dominion over them either.
You're not the A-side fighter to those guys either. You're in no position to demand that the broadcast rights to a fight with either of them go to you.
Dimitri's already been in a bigger fight than you've ever been in, and he beat the guy that you're supposedly trying to fight. So why would he have to make concessions to David? Why would Artur?
Remember, Dimitri was already in a big show with Canelo Alvarez, who he beat. If he beats Artur Beterbiev and becomes undisputed champion, that's another big show and another big payday. Why would he have to make concessions to David, who would just be a mandatory challenger? And why would Artur? You think
Top Rank is gonna roll over for Samson Lewkowicz and David Benavidez?
You're out of your fucking mind. And what you need to do is get while the getting is good. Eddie Hearn wants to make the fight. He's willing to pay for the show. But you've got to play ball, and you're not in control.
I think I once heard Lou DiBella describe Al Heyman as being a bit of a control freak. That is evident here, because now you're trying to control a show you're not even paying for.
You're not paying for this. What pays for this show is Canelo Alvarez's drawing power, and you don't represent Canelo Alvarez.
It's always the same.
Tried to convince the world that Canelo was so scared of David Benavidez, like they tried to convince the world that Anthony Joshua was so scared of Deontay Wilder. It's always the same.
It's the same shit.
But what usually happens to PBC fighters when they have to step out of their bubble? I mean, what usually happens to these guys? What happened to Wilder when he fought Fury? What happened to Wilder when he fought Parker?
He lost.
What happened to Adonis Stevenson when he fought Vosdick?
He lost.
What happened to Stephen Fulton when he fought Naoya Inoue?
He lost.
Happened to Errol Spence Jr. when he finally fought Terrence Crawford.
He lost.
So what do you think is going to happen to David Benavidez if he has to cross the street and fight Canelo? What have I been telling you? What have I been telling you this whole time?
The jig is up. The jig is up, and we see what the holdup is. We see who's ducking who.
You don't fool anybody. Not anymore. Elsewhere in the men's super middleweight division, WBA President Gilberto Mendoza has now clarified that Edgar Berlanga's latest win made him the mandatory challenger for David Morrell's WBA regular title, not for Canelo Alvarez's WBA title.
Well, that makes sense.
More sense than the WBA usually makes, as more often than not it seems like they just make up their rules as they go along and augment them as they go along to cater to whatever fighter or whatever promotional outfit they have a better working relationship with. I agree that it's fitting that Edgar Berlanga should at least have to go through David Morrell before he is so fast-tracked to a Canelo Alvarez fight. Now, I don't think he's about to fight David Morrell. I don't think that's a fight they're interested in. Quite honestly, I don't think that's a fight that he's ready for.
There are very few fights with top-level fighters that he's ready for. Thus, I don't expect this to happen.
Edgar Berlanga is the weakest link at 168 pounds, and he's got to tread carefully. All of those early knockouts he racked up on his way up, they were a gift and a curse. They got him popularity, but they costed him development. They costed him rounds.
His case is a case of arrested development, though he did look good in his last fight with Padraig McCrory, and he hopes to build on that.
Now, I don't think he's going to fight David Morrell, and on the premise that he doesn't fight Canelo Alvarez next. If he doesn't fight him either, who can he fight? One fight that he might be ready for is a Gabriel Rosado fight. The Philly Rican versus the New Yorican.
Gabe is a veteran. He'll give you some rounds. He'll give you some work.
He's been out a while. He's been out a long while when last we saw him, but I still feel like Gabe can push Edgar Berlanga. I still feel like he can test him.
And you could sell that fight.
Two Puerto Ricans, the Philly Rican versus the New York Rican. You could draw a crowd with that fight at the Hulu Theater in New York, where there's a large concentration of Puerto Ricans. You could do it there. You could do it in Florida. There's Puerto Ricans in Florida. There's Cubans too, but there's Puerto Ricans.
Puerto Rican women are hot.
Cuban women too. And you could do that fight. You could do it in New York. You could do it in Florida. If you don't want to go for Gabe Rosado, maybe you can fight Jesse Hart. Philadelphia native Jesse Hart.
I think he's got a fight coming up, and if he makes it through it, you could do a fight between him and Edgar over the summer months.
You could do that. You could do a Bektemir Melankuziev fight. I will admit that facing Bektemir, that's a high risk, low reward, but for a guy as limited as Edgar, almost everybody's a high risk, low reward. At some point, you got to get your hands dirty and you have to roll the dice because there ain't that many safe choices out there. And for what Edgar wants to be paid for a fight, you can't play it safe forever.
What about Rohan Murdoch?
Rohan Murdoch of Australia. Rohan Murdoch was just in there with Christian Mabili. Christian stopped him. Christian knocked him out. He's a big guy and he's a strong guy, but he's no Pernell Whitaker, if you know what I mean. He's no defensive wizard.
Him and Edgar makes for a fun fight. A shootout. 2 strong punches.
They could do that. Now that Edgar has racked up his first knockout in the last 3 going on 4 years, he's got to be riding high. He's got to be feeling confident, and he needs to take that momentum and build on it, even if it means rolling the dice. That if he doesn't get the Canelo Alvarez fight, and most people don't want him to,
Because he doesn't deserve it.
he can fight those guys. Gabe Rosado, Jesse Hart, Bektemir Melankuziev, Rohan Murdoch.
He could fight those guys.
The super middleweight division is a very deep division. David Benavidez, David Morrell, Canelo Alvarez,
Christian Mabili.
unbeaten up-and-comer Diego Pacheco. This is a weight class where you can only step on eggshells, but for so long, you're gonna run into somebody sooner or later. Better it be somebody that you're ready for, someone of your choosing. I saw some preliminary rumors that seem to indicate that Canelo wants to fight Edgar in May, then Jaime in September, where DAZN, they want Munguia to be next. They want Jaime to be next. If he is, that would leave Edgar without a dance partner, and he has to get out there. He has to fight.
He can't sit on his hands waiting for Canelo.
Just racked up his first knockout in a long while, and like I said, he needs to build on that. He needs to build on that momentum and capitalize off that confidence while he still has it.